I know you real well.
I think the only one started down.
Right, I guess we can. We can get started.
Turn it on.
Well, it's electric stuff.
No. Do you talk to him? He thinks
Batteries. Any batteries.
you're kidding me. We didn't have all day to check this thing,
He's from the Township.
It's like let's paint a flagpole from the bottom up.
There you go.
All right. Thanks, everyone. We can get started now. We're a little bit late, but we got a really great turnout, so I appreciate that. My name is Tony Mercantante. I'm the Township Administrator for Middletown. And we're here to come back to the public with the status of the project. As everyone has, I'm sure, for the last few years have been seeing the progress of the construction. I was looking back at the last time we were here, and it was like November 4th of 2018. And at that point, we were looking at a project that was somewhere in the $110, $115 million range. We're now talking about a $200 million project as it's proceeded. So we're here because for a couple of reasons. One, we wanted to update everybody on the status. Number two, as all of you know, there are a lot of new people living in Port Monmouth area, Belford area, since Sandy and since the last time we met. And we want to make sure that newer residents had an opportunity to hear about the project. So what you're going to hear tonight is kind of like an overall summary of the project, all its phases and components, which started with, repairing the dune and filling the beach in Port Monmouth behind what we all call the Spy House, up to the point where we're at today, where you've seen the construction activity starting on Main Street. So we have tonight people from the Army Corp of Engineers. Dave Gentili is the project manager. Dave's been on the project since day one, coordinating this from the Army Corps' perspective. We have Deb Vogel, who's here from the New Jersey Department of Environmental Protection. And we have Lena Stinson, who's also here from the DEP. Deb will speak, and Dave will speak, and kind of give you an overview of the project. And we'll have questions when everyone's done with their presentations. One of the other main purposes of doing this is to kind of dispel some myths that we hear regularly, or questions that we get regularly. One of them being, well, if you built this big pump on Pewes Creek and you've done all this work, why is Port Monmouth still flood sometimes? Well, it will flood until the whole project's completely finished sometimes. That pump helps, but in bad storms, when the tide is right, the mood is right, the conditions are right, it's still going to flood until the last component is finished. And that's the component you see now, starting with basically the foundation, if you will, of the second pump that's going to be on Main Street. So that's one. The other one we hear a lot, or we get questioned about a lot, is if Port Monmouth's not going to flood anymore, is that going to make it worse in Belford? Or is that going to make it worse in Belford and Leonardo? The answer is no, it will not, and it'll be explained to you why that won't be the case. But it's not surprising that people would think that, because if you think about it, well, if there's no water over there, it's got to go somewhere. Well, it is going somewhere, but it's going into the Atlantic Ocean. So it really won't have an effect, but again, that'll be explained to you. And the phase of the project that we're getting into now is the part that's the most, noticeable, right? This is the part where they're going to build the pump station on Main Street. They're going to start building the levee and the wall, which will run along Main Street for the most part, and then ultimately will go out to 36, essentially on the backs of the properties of people who live on Willow Street. And that's going to be the most visible, impactful part of the construction that everyone's going to see, everyone's going to notice. Those of you who live nearby, you're going to see a lot of activity, you're going to hear noise, you're going to hear vibrations as the project's being developed. So again, we're here to answer questions that you might have about that. So this last phase will be the phase that closes the loop, okay? It will close off Port Monmouth from flooding once completed. And the simplest example to give you is in North Middletown, which had their levee system built in 1970, they didn't flood in Sandy. There was no flooding there. It worked. So this will work too. So we wanted to get finished. We're working on the last phase. The other component of this that we're finalizing right now, just so everyone understands, there was approximately 40 properties that had to be transferred over to the, or easements had to be obtained on about 40 properties so that the levee and the wall could be built. Most of those are done and in place now. There are a few properties that still have to go to court. Will not take long. The condemnation process is pretty quick in these cases. But there are some property owners who ultimately held out and did not agree to a price, to a fair market value price for their property. So those matters will be handled in court. And again, within weeks or a couple of months, those should all be resolved. So that's where we're at now. I'm going to turn it over to Dave now, let him go through the project for you, kind of in detail, but I think it's worth it for all of you to see.
With Army Corp of Engineers, I'm the project manager for this project since the beginning.
Hold on one second. Can everyone see the screen at least reasonably well? Do you think we need to lower the lights, or is it okay? Good? Okay, we're good.
So, as Toy mentioned, we're going to go over the entire project, not just the project being constructed, because understand a lot of people might be new to the town, so we want to introduce the overall project so they understand how it'll work as a whole. I'll give an introduction, as well as the Corps of Engineers has a non-federal partner, the state of New Jersey, and they'll be able to provide some information as well, and then can get into the project overview and explain the different phases, contracts, and how the features work, and then give an estimated schedule and inform you what's going on right now and how it may impact or affect you. And we're going to be here to answer your questions. So, main reason the town floods, you have Raritan Bay, as well as the two tidal creeks on both sides of the bay. And it is a low-lying area. A lot of the properties, the first floor elevations of the homes are in the range of about 6 feet at the low-lying areas, and during Sandy, the water surface elevation was roughly 11.5 feet. So what we intend on doing is pretty much creating a line of defense around the town that, this is the Keensburg levee in this area, so we're tying into that at high ground, and then we're running that line of defense around until we get the high ground on the other side of Route 36. And Congress gives us the authority to build these projects. It was initially under Word of 2000 when we started moving forward with it. At the time of Sandy, we were given the authorization under Public Law 113-2 that this project is, for the initial construction, 100% federally funded. And as Tony mentioned, the current working estimate is approximately $250 million. The project then gets turned over to our non-federal sponsor, who operates and maintains that, and that's their role, which is why we wouldn't be able to have a federal project without a non-federal sponsor, because we don't hold on to the projects and operate and maintain them. So I'll turn it over to Debbie, who's with the DEP.
Hi, everybody. Thanks for coming tonight. Thanks, Tony, for that nice introduction. So yeah, I'm with the Office of Coastal Engineering with the New Jersey Department of Environmental Protection. And as Dave mentioned, we are the non-federal sponsor on this Army Corp project. Just a couple of slides to show you hierarchy of the DEP in the state. Jump to the bottom, Office of Coastal Engineering in Township, that's the office that we're in, and we're the non-federal sponsor. And we also have the Office of Dam Safety and Flood Engineering in Trenton. There's some coordination with them for this project as well. Overall, we're under the Division of Resilience, Engineering, and Construction. The director is Dennis Reineck. And we're under the Division of Land Resource Protection and Watershed Land Management. We have a shore protection fund that is dedicated annually $25 million, and that comes from the realty transfer tax. Typically, we have a cost share with Army Corps for these types of projects, but for this project, luckily, this is 100% federally funded, so this is taken on fully from the federal government. Our role typically as a non-federal sponsor on the Army Corps project is to offer funding when necessary. We have a cost share program, and also to provide support staff for all stages of the development, design, and implementation of the project. And then we take on a local sponsor. So usually wherever the project is being constructed, that municipality, possibly the county as well, in this case it is the county as well, are local sponsors. And we kind of act as a liaison between them and the Army Corps. And the township and the county assist us with real estate acquisition, some technical and professional assistance, and also public outreach, such as organizing meetings like tonight. And also, as Tony described, we have to obtain real estate for the Army Corps to be able to construct on properties, both private and public properties. So we obtained easements from the county park system from Middletown Township, and we are currently obtaining easements from some private residents as well. 48 to construct contract 4 and 5 only. And right now we have all of Monmouth County easements in hand, half of Middletown Township in hand, and we have a lot of the private ones, but like as Tony described, they're moving forward in the process, and it should shortly we'll have all the easements that we need to construct the project. Thank you very much.
Okay, so we did this in 2 phases, mainly because it was different types of construction. The first phase was a softer construction, which was the sand. That's more of a sacrificial feature, and we'll have constructed a dune, groin, and pier extension. That was completed in 2015, this summer. Phase 2 is the construction of the harder structures, more concrete, soil, pump stations, which we use to construct the tide gate, pump stations, levees, flood walls, road closure gates, interior drainage structures, as well as this project will have a mitigation component that offsets the environmental impacts that these structures pose. So again, this is the overview. The phase 1 feature is this Bay Shore Park area. The first feature was the groin. That was added. The main purpose of the groin is to prevent the sand from just getting washed away laterally. It has held up as it should. You can tell now we place sand in this area, and most of that sand has washed away. That's how you can tell it is functioning, because the sand is remaining in this area to the east of the groin. Though I understand there is less material than when it was completed in 2015. That's why our beach berm initially in front of the dune was 95 feet. The dune elevation is constructed at an elevation of at least 15 feet, which is 2 feet higher than all the other features, the flood walls, the levees. They're at an elevation of 13 feet, and that's NAVD 88, which is more or less a datum. It doesn't mean the levee's going to be 13 feet above the ground. It's relative to the sea level of what it was back in 1988. And every year, sea level is increasing for this area between 1929 and 1988, the change was approximately 1 foot. So these projects does require renourishment, and the renourishment is a cost-shared item with the non-federal sponsor and split 50-50. And it's estimated that renourishments are needed once every 10 years. And the dune has held up. We've recently done surveys. It's still at an elevation of at least 15 feet everywhere, which is good news. The plants, they help stabilize the dune structure as well as provide habitat. The renourishment, since it has been close to 10 years, the team's been looking to do a renourishment, and it looks like currently the Army Corps, a different division of the Army Corps under the maintenance dredging contractors, they're going to be dredging in the Shoal Harbor area. So that quality sand material in the bay will be placed on the Port Monmouth project, and that could forego this renourishment cycle, which is very good news, as well as it saves both the government and the state money for needing to renourish by using this material beneficially. The other feature, part of phase one, was the pier extension. You'll notice everything with that plastic coated or polymer, the green railings. That's where we extended as well as ramped it up as high as we could while still staying in ADA compliance. So that was constructed, and I usually see it being used most times when I go out to the site, which is nice. So there's the pump station tide gate locations. One you'll notice by Pew's Creek, that is both the tide gate and the pump station, as well as there's going to be one where we're constructing right now, which is one good reason to have this meeting, to answer any questions about the ongoing construction and what to expect to see. So these are some examples and one of the actual pump station and tide gate, that structure on Pew's Creek. It's shut, and it does open and shut during storm events, because even though there's 3 pumps, each pump can pump 40 cubic feet of water in 1 second, which is a total of 120 cubic feet of water in a second, which that can fill an Olympic-sized swimming pool in a matter of under 10 seconds easily.
Well, just a quick question. Nobody ever got it, I don't get answer. On Main Street, or Monmouth, okay, how far from the street into the weeded area is the wall gonna be and the gate?
Right, or we'll get into all those questions, we'll save those all to the end. We're going to give everybody a chance to answer questions, but I'll first go through this because this may answer a lot of questions, and then we'll get into the question portion. But yes, so even though those pumps can pump that much water and move that much water, it's still the magnitude difference of just opening those gates to allow the water to naturally drain at low tide can convey more water than those pumps, which is why they'll open and shut during low tide times of the storm. And yes, the team did a good job at coming up with the operation schedule of how it'll operate. It's also, that's basically the brain of the facility, which has all the control panels. The other building is a generator building that has 2 backup generators, since during storms most of the time we do lose power. One generator can power the entire facility and the pumps, and another one can just power the gate as a backup to the backup. Because the pumps really are mainly needed for extreme heavy rain events when the gates are shut and you get about 500-year rain event at the same time. The water surface elevation will kick on, the pumps starting around 3 feet elevation. The other pump station will look, I don't know, the picture looks kind of dark from this angle, I'm not sure from your angle, but it's a pump station built into a levee or on top of the levee, and that's what will be similar to the pump station over on Main Street. And just to show, that's a coffer dam that was used to divert Pew's Creek to allow this pump station to get built. It sits on, it's well anchored into the ground. It sits on about 280 piles that go, I want to say, approximately 80 feet into the ground. And it has a very solid foundation. For all those residents that were here around the time, you saw the concrete trucks constantly going there.
What happened to the residents that got put a month ago?
Right. So the new pump station, that's what the contractor's currently constructing, is a similar structure, a coffer dam that will enable them to construct the foundation of the new pump station. So levee segments, a levee is pretty much a mound of earthen soil, usually has a type of clay core or a certain level compaction so that it's impermeable, so water can't get through. Sometimes you have cut off walls, sometimes they're not needed. It depends on the hydraulics, because you don't want water to seep around to the defended side of the levee. We often, for most of our structures, have a vegetation-free zone. That doesn't mean there's no grass or there's no plants at all, but our contractors, as well as our team after it's constructed, and our sponsor needs to be able to inspect it and maintain it. So that's the main reason, as well as sometimes it can be hazardous. You don't want a tree to be right next to the structure and that tree to fall on the structure or damage it during a storm, or the roots can provide a path that the water can seep along and gradually erode and potentially cause a failure. So that's the reason. Please, at the end, we'll have open questions.
I was just looking for a basic summary of exactly how this works, how the gate works, is it automatic?
Or
How does this whole thing work?
We'll get there.
get that.
Okay, we'll get there.
So that's the levee feature. And you can see during a flood event, there was a creek in those woods, an area that normally floods. This earthen levee was able to prevent the water from coming into the town during the creek. A flood wall is, there's thousands of feet of flood wall of this project. A good example of one that's already constructed is along Fort Monmouth Road and the green line. And it's a concrete structure. It's about 18 inches to 2 feet in width, even though, again, it's anchored on many piles, about 3 every 8 feet. So you have significant structural support underneath with a solid concrete foundation. That's why we usually call them T-walls for flood wall, because it forms this T, even though you only see that part of it when it's finished and complete, underneath you still have the footings and the piles that support the structure and keep it solid for when water floods. As well as there's often on sometimes both sides or one side, these little swales, they're drainage swales, which usually convey the water so it doesn't pool or build up, whether it be a pump station or a storm drain that leads to a pump station or into the wetland area. That's the purpose of those sections. And this is another example of a flood wall up pad project that was constructed by the Corps at the Boundbrook area. And this is the example of the flood wall along Fort Monmouth Road. That is the typical finish. We use the fractured fin finish and stain the flood wall to make it look more aesthetically pleasing. But as long as it functions, that's the main purpose. So the road closure structures, there's 3 road closure structures. One is on Old Fort Monmouth Road that was already constructed. Then there's one on Broadway as well as Campbell Ave. So this is the example of the one over on Old Fort Monmouth Road. And that gets tested throughout the year by our non-federal sponsors to make sure it'll work in the event of a storm. The road closure gate is on the unprotected side because even though that one is about 22,000 pounds, water is very powerful and still would be able to knock it down. Therefore, the force of the water actually pushes it up against these pillars on both sides of the road. And there's 3 options. We always like to have redundancy to close that gate. There's the electric winches, but if there is no electricity, a backup generator can be used, and even a car with a trailer hitch can be used. Actually, it doesn't even probably need a trailer hitch. So the interior drainage features. So basically, again, we're creating a line of defense around the town at an elevation of 13 feet NAVD when all these structures are closed. So, as well as you have the dune at 15 feet NAVD. So, the fact that, so when you get tidal flood, water won't be able to come up Hughes Creek, water still will be able to come down Compton, but when this wetlands floods, it won't be able to come in the town, provided the water surface elevation
The town of
is
Fort
less
Monmouth, I feel for
than
my
13
fellow
feet
friends and family here.
NAVD.
But what about Wares Creek and Compton's Creek? So it's gonna go up Compton's Creek, it's gonna protect Fort Monmouth and part of East Kingsburg, but it's not gonna do anything for Lower Belfast.
We're going, get to
And
the
the county keeps
questions at
dumping
the end.
dirt into the bay and filling up Ware's Creek every other day.
But,
I'm
so,
just getting tired of hearing this.
Look, please don't interrupt, okay? We're trying to have an organized
I
meeting.
apologize, I'm
We'll
sorry.
get to questions, plenty of time, got a long night.
so we have Raritan Bay as well. So when the storms, the title, this project is ultimately designed to defend against tidal inundation. But a lot of times, we don't want to shut this all off and not have a way for the water to drain out. So that's what these interior drainage features are designed to do. And we have several types of interior drainage features. Usually wherever there's a perforation or an outfall going through the levee that under normal rain conditions would be open. There may be a flap gate, or this is a duckbill valve, as well as a sluice gate to prevent the tidal water from coming back in to the defended area, as well as there are pump stations which pump the water back over the line of defense into the bay. Now, there are, I understand, as Tony mentioned, there are always questions. It's poor policy. We do not, and we have to get permits and show all our hydraulic mapping to not the Corps, because we're not allowed to permit ourselves. So we go to land use to provide us a permit and review our data, as well as we go through several levels of internal reviews from both the individual district as well as outside the other Corps agency or other Corps offices in other parts of the country. And we actually hire, which costs significant six-figure money, to hire professors and other contractors to review and provide input on our projects to ensure that we do not induce flooding to other areas, because as Tony mentioned, and I've heard it at previous public meetings, not just this project, but other projects, because when you have a project, and I understand the theory behind it, okay, if we put a wall of defense around this town, this water that normally would have filled up Fort Monmouth, which will have filled it up in probably under a minute, now has to go someplace else. It's going to be now in my backyard if you're a neighboring community. However, the magnitude difference for tidal events, it's really the tide that controls the water surface elevation. It's not like a river where you only have, even though those are enormous numbers, so X number of gallons per minute, but at least they're measurable, like 138 gallons a minute or a second of water flowing down a stream. The supply from a storm, a tidal storm, is assumed infinite in comparison. So the amount of water, because it's ultimately controlled by the low pressure of the storm, the moon, the sun, the tide will reach that, the water will reach that elevation, whether the project's there or not. So by it being there, it's not going to make the water that much higher in the bay. I often say, it's principle-wise, understand the displacement. Yes, it's lower, but the magnitude of the differences, it's like if you throw a grain of sand in the bathtub or a pool, in theory, the water of that pool went up by that sand, but the differences in the volume are so great, you can't, it's immeasurable. So, that's
I have a question to talk about.
explained.
In theory,
Or still, we can go over the questions at the end.
it's right on this topic, it makes sense to address it now.
No, it doesn't. We'll wait till the end for questions.
Is there an end near,
So, also,
or just death by PowerPoint?
contract 4, that is, again, also, this line of defense won't work, or your flooding will not be eliminated. And even with the project, the flooding's not guaranteed to be eliminated. That's one thing I want to stress. If municipalities say after the project is done, they evacuate during a storm, still evacuate, because there are always chance of storms exceeding this level of defense. How this 13-foot elevation was chosen was based on homes and economics. So it was advantageous for the federal government to fund the project. It had to have a benefit of and cost ratio greater than 1. In other words, the project's not going to cost more than what it's protecting. So these projects do function, but still they're designed to protect the personal property, that when you come back, there would hopefully be no damage or minimal damage to the residents, but they're still not indestructible or designed against the storm, basically, where the water surface elevation is greater than that 13-foot elevation.
I'm sorry, not a
One-
question, but if you could clarify what's on the map.
Okay,
Just tell us the street, like,
right,
which street's the flood wall and which street's on the levee.
okay, definitely. So, contract 4, that is one of the remaining contracts that we still need the award, that we're waiting to get all the real estate obtained. This is Route 36, so contract 4, because we are trying to get this line of defense in place as quick as possible. I know I've been here many years and many times, and so I'm looking forward to wrapping it up as quick as possible. But these projects of this magnitude do take time, but we divided this contract into 2 parts solely because of the real estate. We don't have all the real estate for the 4B features, which are the levee, the flood wall, and the road closure gates. So there's a road closure gate over here that will cross Broadway, and that ties into levee, which turns into flood wall, which then there's another road closure gate over on Campbell, and that not only will handle the road, but there's a diversion of the Henry Hudson Trail, that the trail will pass through that closure gate as well, so that the trail won't need to be blocked off. And it will turn back into flood wall, which ties into Route 36. And part of contract 4A was Route 36 road regrading, the tying, as well as utility relocations and infrastructure for future contracts. So in some areas, we had to tie in and elevate a property over on Wilson to ensure that water wouldn't be able to go down Route 36 and circumvent or flank our project and fill in the low-lying area. That, as well as Route 36, it was probably only a matter of 6 inches, but that road still need to be increased in elevation to ensure we had that constant line, which is how this project functions by having that constant line of defense. The utility upgrades or relocations were because most of the power we didn't need, easements, so we were able to get the power companies already had right-of-ways, so we were able to increase the power that went from roughly the firehouse to the area of our pump station, because, or future pump station. So this way, all that is already in place, because there is a lot of coordination, and it's great to see everybody working together towards a common goal to benefit the community, and that includes the utility companies such as Verizon, JCP&L, Comcast. We've met with all of them multiple times, as well as the water company, the gas company, to ensure that these projects, and that's really what takes a lot of time in planning. It's easy to draw a line saying, okay, you draw a line there, keep the water out, no problem. But once you start looking at it, you realize all the utility lines that run through and how to make it constructible and feasible to construct.
And it took 36
So-
years?
And counting. So that is contract 4 and 4B, and 4B is yet to be awarded. What has been recently awarded is contract 5, and that's some of the work you're seeing out there right now over by Main Street, where they have this coffer dam that was put in for the future pump station that will go there, which will help the interior drainage.
And right now, they're not doing the work because it keeps flooding there.
they stop working.
Can we just keep it in order so we're not interrupting?
Yeah, I'm just saying.
I understand, but let's get finished with the presentation, then we'll get to everybody's.
When are we gonna be done with the presentation?
How many pages of PowerPoint?
I believe
That's by
there's
PowerPoint. When are we gonna be done?
probably
How many frames left?
Wait, or less than 5.
Not everyone has been here from the beginning and knows all of this, so we're trying to review it for everyone's benefit, right? We don't all know everyone's situation.
Let everybody, let them finish the program and then answer your question. Otherwise, your questions won't be answered. They'll call off and they will leave you. You won't be nowhere. Oh, really?
So,
Well,
this
we
is,
won't leave anybody, but we'll get to it.
No, you won't leave.
so this is a very low spot over by Brainerd in town, and that's why this area was chosen. They were constructing a drainage swale. However, that which will feed this pump station, however, that has not occurred yet, because right now, we awarded contract 5 into a base plus optional areas to construct. And that's solely because we want to get going like on contract 4. We want to get this constructed as quick as possible. However, we don't have the property or easements necessary to construct it all. Therefore, we're only allowed to build on what we do have property and easements for, which is this area in the gray, which was the base contract. That was roughly $20 million to include the pump station and this levee. And the options will be this swale option, which will take approximately 194 days to construct after we have all the necessary property and are able to make the award, as well as the road raising over off Port Monmouth Road. And this section ties into our dune. It will be a levee, and that's also part of option 2, which is estimated to take approximately 305 days to construct. And the reason, or one of the reasons, because usually in this case we would do another road closure gate, but it was best to use a road raising because there are parts of the community do lie outside of the defended area that are already at an elevation greater than 13. And we wanted to maintain access to those areas, which is why, even though it's more costly, it's still the right thing to do to construct road raising instead. Also, there's a flood wall portion that will tie into contract 4B, road closure gate at Broadway. And that also we're not currently awarding because of real estate, and that take is estimated to be another 336 days of construction. So the overall completion date as of now is spring of 2025, and a lot is dependent on the real estate, mainly for contracts 4B and 5. And this is the contact information for the state of New Jersey as well as myself. And the next slide, I believe, is questions. But I'll leave this. Everybody, now, I guess, what you want.
One question at a time.
Right?
Okay.
Will you go on the township website?
Yeah, well,
Thank you.
we can also send people, if anybody really wants to see the PowerPoint again, we can send it to them. Yeah, we'll make it available on the website.
The question is, on Main Street, where you're building the actual flood wall, and you're putting the pump station and a flood gate in, how far back from Main Street into the crow weeds is that wall gonna be? Is it 10 feet off of Main Street, 50 feet off of Main Street? And how high would it be?
Well, the height's going to vary because the top of the wall has to be at 13 feet. So as you see the wall on Fort Monmouth Road, that height
13
varies. depending on
13 feet above the mean tide.
I thought you said
Yeah.
15.
No, the dune is 15, the wall is going to be, the wall and levee will be 13 feet, basically above sea level. So they can see.
Oh, it's not slightly. Right. About 40 feet, I would say, the pump from the levee or the pump station to Main Street.
The curb, right?
We actually pay 40.
Okay, so it's going back 40 feet, it's not gonna be run along the street per se.
The station's going back 40 feet.
What about the wall? That's,
Right. See, there's actually going to be a drain, because you have to feed these pump stations with a steady source of water that pumps so much water. So it's almost going to be like a little ponding area in front of the pump station.
oh, okay, I'm not referring to the pump
Right.
station, I'm referring to the wall that continues to run all the way to Broadway.
Right, this, you mean the levee, because it will be a levee.
Oh, it's a levee, it's a dirt levee, not a wall?
Yes, yes. In
About
this area.
about the same distance.
From Fort Monmouth Road to Broadway.
Not the whole distance. So, right here, after the pump station, there's a turnaround, like the pump station's over here. Then the earthen, pretty much a grass mound levee continues. There'll be a turnaround on the top, and then
No problem.
it does transition into a wall, a flood wall.
Where's
Similar.
Route 36 on that map? To the left?
Or Route 36 goes this
Okay.
way.
I'm
This is
concerned-
Main Street
Right.
here.
Broadway to the beach, not to Route 36, Broadway to the beach is gonna be a metal wall, a flood wall.
No, from this area where right now the contractor has a cofferdam starting construction in this area mainly, where that picture was taken. Oh, sorry, it's not there, it's over there. Hold on. Let me, okay. So, okay. So this is where the pump station is. From this area here, all the way to Port Monmouth Road will be the earthen, dirt, grass levee. From this area here to Broadway will be a concrete wall similar to what was constructed over there.
So where you live would be the wall, across from you.
Yeah.
Yeah,
And
okay.
I'm sorry, you have 3 pumps in contract 1. How many are going to be in contract 5?
Two
Two pumps.
40 CFS pumps, so a total of 80 cubic feet of water a second.
2 pumps, 80.
Each pump
I'll do
will
the
be
math
able
later.
to pump to 40 cubic
The
feet.
flow of the discharge of the pumps, which way is it going to go?
It will go outward into the Compton Creek, or right, it discharges on the other side of the line of defense.
And the suction's coming from where contract 5 is?
Or it actually, so there's interior drainage along contract 4B, as well as contract 5. There's multiple sources. There's the low point in town, that low area in Brainerd, I believe it's about 5 foot in elevation. And as well as there's interior drainage that currently discharges behind the Park Ferry condos. There's going to be drainage swales that pretty much feed this pond in front of the pump station, as well as along this line, there's a culvert that goes across Broadway. So water, when these, because right now there's several streams and natural outfalls, all those will get sluice gates and have a line of defense. So if they need to be shut, the water will then flow towards the pump.
The discharge is going to come from contract 5 area all the way to the left, and you're going to be dumping it into the creek, Compton Creek area, thus raising that Compton Creek.
No, this only occurs during tidal events, so the water surface elevation is a fixed elevation.
Hey, good evening. I'm Paul Jalowski. I'm with the Corps of Engineers as well. Another way to look at what the pump station is doing is we're closing off a line of defense. You're still going to have rain and stuff building up inside. So to prevent flooding, because the water cannot get to where it was going before the structures were built, we have pump stations. And the interior drainage will be constructed and designed so that the water will flow to the pump stations, and the pump stations pump it back out into where the flooding is occurring.
We're going through high tides right now in that creek over the last couple of days. It's
The system's not complete,
understood.
so that you're still going to get flooding until this entire line of defense is constructed.
But that will mitigate that problem we're experiencing now. That's the tides, that's nuisance flooding.
Or you might be on the Belford side.
Yes.
Right.
Belford side.
Okay,
Right.
that won't.
Now, yeah, if you leave where you signed in, because we do have other studies in the area that we're looking at, other areas. If you're getting flooded, it won't hurt. I'll share it with the other study team. If you put I'm not sure if they asked for a dress or something, but if you can say you get flooded, it will give that team a better understanding of your current situation.
Well, let's just put it this way. If you're in Belford on this side of the highway, you get flooded, right? So, but not all of it. And what Dave was mentioning earlier, the way the Army Corps approach, and this is the federal government, the way they approach all these projects across the whole country is that they do a cost-benefit analysis. Now, this cost-benefit analysis for Fort Monmouth was done decades ago, right? The only reason this project got funded at 100% was because Middletown had started working with the Army Corps back in the late 1990s.
1980.
Well, the fact that the process that started back then was the only reason this got funded at 100%. So if you want to say Sandy may have been a good thing in some ways, bad thing in a lot of ways, but it triggered this happening. So they do a cost-benefit analysis, and at that time, Belford didn't meet the cost-benefit analysis requirements. Leonardo did. Now, that may change now. The economics have changed. So again, they can look at those areas and see if they should be entitled to a similar type of project. But again, you're talking 10, 15 years before you'll actually see it because of the mechanics of the way the federal government funds projects like this. So yes, it's a possibility, but it may be a long way off in real life.
And the 100-year storm is now occurring every 10 or 15 years now. So have you adjusted your designs to accommodate the changes in the
Yes, or
regs?
the frequency curves and the storms, like this storm or this project was originally for 100-year, but since then, since storms have increased, it's actually gone down as far as defending against the frequency. And that's why I personally usually like talking water surface elevation and just the numbers and not the 80-year storm, 500-year storm, or 100-year storm, because those frequency curves are constantly adjusting and getting reevaluated.
But again, just keep in mind one thing. The North Middletown, the Petersburg Flood Control Project was built in 1970. And it worked, right? Nobody in that area of Middletown got flooded. And so and Sandy was a more than 100-year storm. So these work. If you have a, biblical storm, it probably won't work. But the typical storms, hurricanes that we would get maybe every 10 or 20 or 30 years, it should protect against that.
Bill, to Bill's point, and this just brings up another point, I have two questions. One, dunes did not exist when this was all designed, and now the road is being raised. And my question is, have you reevaluated your numbers to take into consideration this development, this and Park Ferry across the street as a result?
Yes, and that's, as explained, that's one of the reasons we did do the road raising. And also, during Sandy, we did actually have to reevaluate all the numbers. We're not going based on the 1980 or 1994 or 2000 economics. Part of the Hurricane Sandy bill did say you have to go out and still verify that there is still a cost benefit for this project. Because some projects that I had, so many homes were just wiped out that there was no longer a project that had that cost benefit over one.
Okay, and the other question I had, and this has to do with the raising of the road and what is going to happen to the beach and the area that I believe there's a berm going in that goes from Fort Monmouth Road to the beach. Is that correct? The little thing.
Yes.
Yeah, and I was just wondering, so is there water that's going to be coming out of there? And if so, like the type of water that you're talking about, it sounds like it's going to create hazard there, and you're not going to be able to traverse the beach. Right now, that beach is only about 10 to 15 feet wide at low tide. And so where is it going to come out?
I don't know if I'm completely understanding the question. I know this beach berm, we are going to look to renourish
I think the idea
or add
that little piece that's going through the beach, nope, that's not going to transport any discharge. There's no discharge.
No.
So what is coming out there?
Nothing, it's just going to be a levee that's going to match up with the dunes.
That's just to tie into a high ground to draw the line.
Oh, so there's no...
There's no water flow.
There's
No.
water.
No, that's going to be basically an earthen berm, a levee
I see.
planted in the ground.
Hi, Dave.
Actually, I was just looking for like an outline of the basic mechanics of this mitigation strategy. Like how do the levees work versus the gates? Are the gates automatic? Is there a trigger for the pumps?
Yes.
Where does the water go that the pumps are pumping the water out to? Is there a certain distance away from the shoreline?
No, all the pumps pretty much discharge it right to the other side of the line of defense. And pretty much, you have that solid elevation line, it doesn't help that my shadows there, at an elevation of at least 13 feet. So if your
Is
water
that the flood
trying
wall
to...
that you're referring to? Is this like the bathtub that was proposed for New York City?
Yes.
Essentially,
I guess. But yeah, so you have this constant line of defense that ties into natural high ground over here and the Kingsburg levee system
and that's
over there.
13 feet?
At an elevation of at least 13 feet. Some areas are constructed higher like the dune because they're sacrificial. They can get washed away a little at a time, so they just have to last so many hours through the storm. But, so you have this line of defense, and like the pictures some of them showed, these features keep the water out, whether you have water from the Compton Creek, because you get a tidal event here, this whole area floods, depending how extreme Route 36 will flood. This whole area used to flood, but now we're building these gates to prevent the water from coming in. So it's pretty, that's the whole
Are they in an open position most times and then they close?
Yes.
And
They're
then how do
normally-
they get closed? Is it automatic? Is it triggered by
Or
an event?
Talk about
These
the
will-
operation a little bit.
That's what I'm
Right.
looking for you.
They wanna know if the
road
system's
closure
human or
gates
automated.
Need to be closed
Both.
manually.
Can't you understand
The non-federal
Some features
sponsor
are automated.
goes out and closes them. The tide gate is automated, but the non-federal sponsor does observe it, watches it, and operates it as well, because they're operating the Kingsburg facility in the town next door as well. And the gates do take readings that our non-federal sponsor can look at the computer screen and see water elevation on this side is X, water elevation on that side's this. Okay, the gate's opening, should open, close automatically, but it can be overridden and open, close, or the pumps can go on. There are pump triggers for elevations. One pump goes on at 3 feet, 2 pumps go on at 3.5 feet, all 3 pumps go on at 4 feet. Where's the other pump? Yeah, I guess. But, yes.
So the bigger picture about the operation, so the weather situations are monitored by the county, by the state, and when certain weather events are predicted, that will trigger this action plan for the state to go out there and start shutting gates, close.
So it's human
Yes,
interface.
It's both. The pumps work off of the water elevation on the interior of the system. Once it's completed, the pumps work off the water elevation. The tide gates, which Dave explained very well, work based on a difference in elevation. But what triggers the operation of the whole system is the prediction of a weather event.
So
And
what
there's
happened
certain-
2 weeks ago when I couldn't get out of work?
The system's not complete. You're gonna still flood until this
But there
line of
wasn't even a big
defense.
storm. I couldn't.
That's tidal, that's probably some tidal events
Were the pumps turned on 3 weeks ago when we had the storm?
No.
Were the pumps in Hughes Creek turned on to pump out the water?
No, I'll answer it for you.
Yeah, so.
So it's human interface is incompetent, so we need something better.
And it's not done by an automatic trigger.
That's not a fair comment.
Pumped out 3 weeks ago when my family lost their cars and everybody on fucking Brainerd got destroyed. Again.
All right, let's go back to the order of the question.
So I'm answering it. I'm just curious.
The answer is, it's not finished.
I understand, so somebody failed 3 weeks ago.
Nobody failed.
Somebody failed.
Nobody failed.
We've had no water in the town since this project started. The flooding has been at a minimum. And we had a storm 3 weeks ago that the pumps did not get turned on and the blocks flooded. So whose fault is that?
Because the water came from Common Street, not Hughes Street. It had nothing to do with
I was in Hughes Creek. I live on Brainerd. I see this all the time. Where do you live?
Belford.
Okay, so you see it all the time too then, right? So
And you're still gonna flood
who didn't
as long as
pump?
Compton Street floods.
Nobody,
Simple as
Why
that.
did the flood alarm go off 25 minutes after the water was in town?
We'll go into it.
but
Because you don't have
again,
that.
until
Answer
these
the question.
contracts.
Answer my question, please.
Answer the question.
Answer the question.
Answer the question.
Right, I'm trying to.
Answer the question.
You've been showing us this for fucking years. We're all here for that
Answer the
answer.
question.
Who's
Right.
responsible?
Until-
You guys are.
Until these two
That's why we're here,
contracts.
sir.
But you're not answering the question of what happened
He's
3
trying,
weeks
he's
ago.
trying to,
Where's
but
the
you're cursing at
3
him,
weeks ago?
you're not letting him speak.
I
Let him
submitted
speak.
a
Everybody-
question on December 23rd and still have not received a reply back from the town.
Wait.
I
Okay.
work for the, I work for the Corps of Engineers.
Good answer, good answer.
Please, everybody, let him answer the question, please.
Not funny.
Okay. So we have this line of defense that is not constructed. We do not have anything from here to Route 36. So when this 3 weeks ago was a tidal event and water inundated the town, it was high enough that it went over Main Street and went through the storm drains.
Which are
There's
plugged.
no pump. Our pumps cannot keep up with the tide. It's like the example I was using before, the grain of sand, and it's an unlimited supply of water. These pumps, though, compared to a fire engine pump,
Listen, we get
they're
that, we understand that.
enormous, but if
We
you
don't
don't
understand that
have
it's not complete, we get that, but the problem is that the water came up Wilson Avenue too, which is on that side where you already built those pumps.
That's because it's the storm drains fill up on this side.
The new construction
Yeah.
blocked the drains.
You blocked all the drains on Main Street. Army Corps blocked the drains.
Nobody even clears the drains in this town, that's a whole other story. Don't even get me started with that, I call every week about this.
The pumps of Hughes Creek do not come on with the elevation.
But you blocked the drains.
Yeah.
The Corps project.
So it's not your fault.
Yeah, you did.
And that's the township, that's
There was,
So you're blaming them too?
No, they didn't.
Good.
Alright, listen now, we gotta talk to them, I call every week about the
The
drains.
reason the pumps did not come on was because the difference in elevation didn't get high enough to trigger the.
All right,
So
that's
the
fine.
analog system did not work. You closed one of the street gates, right? You closed the street gate on Old Fort Monmouth Road. But the township didn't get any notification that there was going to be this massive surge of water. You guys expected it. You closed that gate for the first time ever.
No, it wasn't.
or
It
it
That was the
wasn't,
first time I've ever seen it. I go up and down that block every day.
was closed before.
And I've never seen it closed.
Very rarely.
Right.
Very rarely.
Rare.
or the state does operate that gate to minimize lower events. It has been shown like those full moon high tides when there used to be more frequent flooding, I've heard on Wilson. That's why they do operate it occasionally. However, 3 weeks ago, that event was high enough that water could actually come in via Compton Creek side. And until you get that line of defense, our pumps are useless. Because you'll be pumping against the entire bay and a storm low pressure system that will fill in the water 5 times faster than we can pump it out.
With all due respect, so where you're pumping this water back into these tidal areas, these tidal creeks, when are we going to redredge the tidal creeks to accommodate the extra volume. Is that part of this project, to re-dredge those tidal creeks?
No, but think about it, when these pumps will be active, this whole area is gonna be flooded. It's all a creek.
We understand that, yeah, and that's what the walls are meant to
So
hold back,
it
right?
doesn't need dredging, the water's gonna stay at the same, we're just taking the water from
So
this
that's
side to pump it, bail out.
So to that point, going back to what you said about the NAV8, the D standard, from 1927 to 1988, the water levels rise 1 foot.
29, yes.
Okay. It's 2023, and the climate's just getting warmer, so nobody thinks it's a better idea to make that wall higher than 13 feet?
Again, this is
Or make deeper?
purely based on economics that
Oh,
was
no,
done
I get
by
that.
the reports, by the frequency curves, by the latest data we have on hand.
But that's not really the latest data. You're
We
going on standard based on
evaluated
how long
everything
ago.
in 2013 was the last time we did the economics.
Decades.
As far as these projects go,
No, I-
we
listen,
would
I
be
get it,
in
I
a
get it.
never-ending loop, and I have seen it
Yeah.
going.
I'm
And
not
that's why
in
it's great to have the support of the municipality and the non-federal sponsor, because at least, and we do design these projects, so in the future, if Congress tells us, because we look at resiliency, because we know the storms are getting worse, and we may want to add a couple feet onto this. However, until we're authorized to look at that and study that before spending every taxpayer's money,
Yeah, no, I understand.
we're not allowed to do it. So that's why the foundations for these flood walls are more than what's needed. So if we were to add on another 2 feet, we could.
So basically, the way this is,
After Hurricane Sandy, to raise your houses 15 feet above, not the first floor.
Right, but this isn't built to FEMA flood standards. It's purely based on economics, first floor elevations, the damages the federal government would have to pay out on an annual basis, that it's greater than one, the cost to benefit ratio.
So this project's not gonna be completed for many years. And I'm not an engineer, I'm not trying to tell you guys how to do your job. But 3 weeks ago, we had a travesty in this town, and our flood alarm didn't go off until 20 minutes after the water already hit. We had roads closed at 3 o'clock in the morning without notification to the township. So I'd like to see something change on that end. I'm happy with the flood project, I appreciate what you guys are doing. I am not happy with the fact that 3 weeks ago, we had a massive problem in this town, and no one seems to be accountable for it. We've had floods before. I've lived in Port Monmouth for over 20 years on Brainerd Ave. I lost my house during Sandy, and I've stayed here after it was rebuilt. And I want to continue staying in this town. What happened 3 weeks ago was garbage. We had no notification. By the time the water was in, then the flood alarm goes off. So maybe that should be part of this whole remodel, is that you tell the township, or give the township advance notice of these events. You're telling me it's an analog system where people have to make determinations. Why is it not all automatic? Why is it not just based on flow of water? Why are we waiting for a human error? How long does it take the guy to get from Kingsburg to Port Monmouth when there's an emergency? Or how long does it take him to get from Lakewood Beach to
How long
Port
does it
Monmouth?
take him to make a decision?
How long?
Tony, how long does it take him to make a
We're
decision?
operating very poorly for a $250 million project.
Those times to react are built into the overall.
It doesn't feel like this, sir, so no offense.
No, I understand.
Doesn't
But
feel like
what-
that.
I think the biggest point is the system's not gonna operate the way it's being designed to operate
For another 5 years.
until we finish that line of defense. That's unfortunate,
And
but that's
we
the reality.
we're
So
not
we
the
have-
ones that look at the forecast. The Army Corps, we turn the project over to our non-federal sponsor, and they're monitoring the weather and deciding, do we close the gate or not?
So maybe
In
we should
accordance-
send an entire
non-federal
to the town
sponsor.
to do that for you. Maybe somebody living
That's
in
what I
Port Monmouth should be able to go ahead and make that assumption.
Where does the
Right,
flood
and-
alarm come
Say the
from?
name.
I have no idea, it was the first time I've ever heard it.
Introduced this.
But I heard it after my
You
partner.
said you get a flood alarm.
What's that?
flood alarm, it was like way after the fact. There was
Where does that come from?
I have no idea. First time I ever heard it. Yeah, first time I ever heard it. Got out, the alarms were wailing.
All right, let's try to get in order so everyone gets the chance to be able to.
She's the sacrificial person that they sent to the
People want to ask questions, they should sit up there.
This portion here, we're hoping to start as soon as we have all the necessary easements in place. Until then, I can start. It's estimated or hoping by this summer that we'll have everything in place that we can award that segment to the contractor.
A minimum of 123 resident homes are affected right there, a high-density area. So answer to that.
Yeah, I think the easement for, are you in the dunes?
I am.
Okay, I think we got the Park Ferry easement today. So if we don't have the dunes, it's any day. So as soon as they have those in place, they can, move forward with that part of the project.
Once they all get recorded and.
What does that mean in time? If you get
Or I'm thinking by summer, or possibly.
completed 305 days from there?
That's the estimated schedule.
Right.
So then what happens to that road
How high is that elevation?
for traffic?
The road?
So how do people get in there?
Or only at the crest, it will be 13 feet to complete the line of defense, but how high into the existing road.
You know, I'm not sure if this pertains to the high-level floodplain. I mean, this whole project is aimed at major storm events, tidal events. We have tidal events more frequently than major events that affect this area, right? I mean, you're all aware of it. Brainerd Avenue in particular, and then over in the Plymouth Avenue, that tide comes up. That's a Pew's Creek issue. Is there any idea of coordinating the closing of the floodgate for
Yes.
minor tidal flooding events?
The state has been proactive and they went and got approval because initially we were looking at major storms, but those full moon high tides, they now are closing the gate more frequently than what was initially thought, and that's kind of an ancillary benefit, even though it's designed solely for the tidal. The community will benefit by having these features in place and operate.
It's glad to hear that. And let me just have one follow-up question with that I just happen to know that there's one of these gates. It comes, I believe, part of Monmouth and Wilson drain into the wetlands on Wilson Avenue.
Yeah.
And
That gate that was constructed by the municipality
Yes.
before this
Yes.
project, yes.
So the point of me just asking this is that is this like a coordinated strategy? Because if you close the floodgates, I can't quantify the volumes of water that we're going to see. But if you close the floodgates due to a high tide, you do it at a low tide, and then there's a rain, and then the drainage systems drain into the meadows, which exacerbate the flooding. Is that something that these pumps could potentially manage?
Yes.
And they do. That's what they're designed to do. Good. So somebody's coordinating this, and it's gonna be a solution.
Definitely coordinate.
Just to also touch base, I mean, having to do with Pew's Creek and the floodgate there, I just want to confirm what you said, that now the township, or there's an incorporation that on nuisance tidal flooding, that it's being handled at the present time? Because I know for a fact, 3-4 days ago, I can't get in or out of my neighborhood. We can lose, I know people have lost vehicles because of just this normal nuisance flooding. It's a tidal gate, should be for tidal events, which high lunar tides are tidal events. That's my biggest concern.
Just a good example, again, I mentioned earlier, North Middletown, we have the levee, but we also have the pump station. If anyone's familiar with that, right down on the end of Ideal Beach, there's a pump station there. So they don't get even nuisance flooding anymore because if the system fills up, it's pumped out immediately. So there's no opportunity to flood the streets. That's the same way it's going to work here. There shouldn't be nuisance flooding once the system is completed.
But where I am, it has nothing to do with Compton. Nothing, unless we have a bad storm, it will come in through Compton. But with those gates being down, I've been here 25 years. With those gates being down, I can definitely say we don't get any water. None whatsoever. With those gates up, with nuisance flooding, or if they're late getting up, we are guaranteed to get flooding. No matter if we got the pumps going.
What street are you on?
I'm sorry?
What street?
I'm on Avenue D.
Avenue D, okay, yeah.
Yeah. So when we got 2 corners right there and we got nowhere to go.
Well, there's no reason the pumps can't be utilized, even those smaller events. Again, it happens in North Middletown, happens all the time, they don't flood.
But it's the gate, but what we are flooding is still right now during all the nuisance flooding tides, since the gates have been installed, we still flood. So and the gates aren't coming down for that. So it's not about the pumps where we are, it's the gate.
Well, that's the DEP will operate the gate and the pumps, and we coordinate with them. And so we can talk to you about your specific area, and certain events, we can make sure they get closed. They're there.
Right, if we have an address, we can look at the elevation of the property to see if that number should
I've
be
got
lower.
pictures, dates, time, you name it, just to show. Thank you very much.
I don't mean to interrupt, but if you just annotate that on the sign-in sheet, his team is going to look at that based on the level.
So we live on Brainerd, and we've been told that a flood like this hasn't happened since Sandy, right? So how and why did Brainerd, Monmouth, Maine, whatever, get flooded this time, 1? 2, how do we prevent that the next time? 3, out of nowhere, like, how do we prevent that from happening the next time? I mean, it's never really happened like that before since the hurricane, so why all of a sudden did it happen? Because our whole road says it's because the floodgates weren't closed prior to that, so we're just not.
Ultimately, it's because the tide level of the bay, I believe it was around 6, right, it was just above 6 feet. And that's just more, the smaller events, water can't get over too much of this area from Compton, but that water did flood up. As somebody mentioned, some of the equipment stop logs even floated up onto the roadway that need to be removed. But that's basically just the tide level. How to prevent it from the future, I can't say it won't be the last time or that the next time that we'll be able to prevent it, because odds are it could happen again before the 2 years that's going to be needed to complete this.
Now, were the floodgates open? Did you guys not shut them?
Or, again, I don't know that the first contract has been turned over to the non-federal sponsor to operate. But I can say whether they were shut or open, the flooding would have been the same because it's tidal. Water will find the lowest point to get in. That's why we tied off 13 feet on both sides until you have that constant line of defense to stop water from coming in.
Dave, once again.
Okay, I got one more question.
Actually, Dave, hold on, I'll answer. Listen, I'm Dan Horgan, I'm from the Bay Shore Floodgate. I actually run the Port Monmouth facility. I heard a lot of questions coming out The Port Monmouth facility right now, and you live on Avenue D, we're actually doing a study now trying to figure out when we can close these gates to try to slow down your flooding that comes up through your storm drains. With Port Monmouth, we cannot. What happened over on Brainerd, what happened, I watched it, I was there, I watched it come across Main Street, through Brainerd, through the other road, all the way out to Wilson, and now started dumping into the catch basin behind Port Monmouth. Okay, we were at a -2 elevation of water behind that gate. My pumps won't kick on until an elevation 3 plus 3.0. Okay, I can't suck anything out of Compton Creek. Not 1 inch of water can I suck out of Compton Creek unless it comes through every one of your houses and lands in the catch basin behind it.
So does that make sense for a flood program?
No, it's because it's not complete. You know
Well,
what I'm saying?
We're talking about 3 weeks ago, right? We're talking about the storm.
3 weeks
So
ago.
during that storm, the
Correct.
floodgates were closed, correct?
Closed.
The pumps were not turned on because they didn't hit a high enough level until it flooded the block? I don't understand that.
Port
They were on the other
Monmouth,
side?
listen, Port Monmouth, that facility, Dave, if you could
So
service
there's
Port
pumps in Hughes
Monmouth,
Creek, right?
up there, Hughes Creek.
Yeah, that's where the water comes in on Brainerd.
Listen, Hughes Creek, I cannot, the water came in from Compton Creek, across Main Street, down through Brainerd, all the way over, and started spilling into Hughes Creek, okay? So basically, the gates were closed, okay? My pumps will kick on at a +3. A +3 doesn't even flood Avenue D, okay? So at +3, my first pump will kick on, if it reaches that behind the gate, okay? Then if it still rises, at 3.5, the second pump, and at 4, the third pump. You know, hopefully all 3 pumps were slowing down wherever that water's coming from. But if I'm not flooding Avenue D, I'm protecting everything within that Hughes Creek basin. Where that water came from that day was right out of Compton Creek. That's the project that's now underway.
Yeah, that's why
it
got flooded.
Yes, that's why everyone got flooded. Okay? There's no way for me to help you guys over there with that flood, with that pump station. I can't pull no water from there.
Dan, once again, not to interrupt,
Go
but
ahead.
to support what Dan's saying, just so that you all understand, I'm a witness to this because I was there, and I spoke to Dan the other day. To support what he's saying, those slide gates at the marina were closed on Thursday, which was the 22nd, approximately noon to 1 p.m., okay? We didn't get hit with all that water on Brainerd until Friday, the 23rd.
Yes, sir.
Early morning tide, okay? The slide gates were closed on Thursday, which was the day before. The meadows out there was completely empty.
Gotcha.
I was out there up on Port Monmouth Road looking out, and guess what? All you could see was the laterals heading towards the marina slide gates. They were closed a day in advance before that 23rd flood.
Okay.
It'll be just like today. We have that storm coming and we have an extreme high tide tonight. Yes. The gate was closed yesterday.
Okay.
Okay, so we closed well in advance. You can see storms. We're not, you know, it's not like we can't watch storms, you know, coming. Okay, so we know they're coming. You know, we set everything up, we prepare everything, we close the gates. We actually closed them at low tide, you know, before the storm. So that gives us, typically yesterday, it gave us a -4 behind the Port Monmouth gate. Okay, of course, with runoff and things, stuff coming, it's going to build. As long as it doesn't get to a 3, my pump's not going to kick on. But I'm still protecting everybody. I'm down on Avenue D as long as them gates are closed. Okay? Unfortunately, and it is unfortunate, it was an elevation 6.3. You know, it's been many years before anybody has seen a 6.3 elevation. Okay? That water came right out of Compton Creek like nobody's business.
Okay.
Okay, so when I came out from behind that road closure, all I heard were horns on cars.
So what you're saying is in 5 years, that project will be finished and that won't be a problem anymore?
Exactly.
That's all I can accept, right?
I would like to excuse myself. It works for me. I'm Dennis Ronick. I'm the director of the Resilience Engineering and Construction Program, and Coastal Engineering is part of my team. And I think, gentlemen, this is just kind of pointed at you. I think you're asking who's running it. We're running it. We're planning on running this when it's complete. We have a really competent team that watches the weather all the time. I run Bound Park, I run my team right now runs large infrastructure projects like this and operates them after the port turns them over. We're building, in our group right now, we're building the Hudson County system. You might hear about it on Hoboken, that's got 27 gates. We're working on that one, and we're gonna start that main construction almost simultaneously with yours. It's a very similar system that prevents the surge from flooding the area. You can't pump yourself out of that surge. And I think that's what we're saying. Until you've got your barrier up, you're not gonna be able to pump yourself out. But I hope we answered your question on how to system up.
I appreciate that.
But I was letting it build for a little bit before I stepped in because I just didn't want to, I wanted to let it fester for a second. But I'm really proud of the team we're building. We're really confident on operating these systems. I know we're going to be able to operate. We're operating Bound Brook. We're going to be opening Meadowlands, Hoboken. This project, hopefully Union, that's getting started very soon. Union Beach, we're doing Keensburg, we operate now. I'm proud of the team we've built. I'm proud of the team we're building to continue operating these systems. And I'm going to stay after the meeting. If you want to introduce yourself and talk to me, I'll get you an email, and I'll take any email you want to send me. All right? I just wanted to introduce myself, and this is my first time at a meeting. I think some of you used to know Bill Dixon. I took over his job and another gentleman's job, and I want to thank you all for having me tonight. I'm glad I got to say hi, and I will stay afterwards if you want to talk. All right. I'm Dennis Reineck. I've been with the department 35 years. Came out of the site remediation program, and I build infrastructure. All right, that's what I've done for the state since I've been here. The last one I did was $175 million. This one's going to be bigger, and I'm really excited about the one we're starting in Hoboken. You'll probably be seeing that in the paper too. So thank you again, and I am going to stay until it's over. Thanks.
I'll be here too if anyone has questions.
Hi, just a couple quick questions on your chart here. The raised wall, the green wall, right? From that there to the orange raised road, there's going to be nothing in there, nothing added?
Or pretty much what completes the line of defense is that.
So the answer is no. Thanks.
Correct. Nothing there, it ties in both sides.
I'm good with no. And on the raised wall, obviously, it's not going to, my understanding is it's going to go 13 feet high, is that accurate? The orange raised road?
Yes.
No, not there, it's right
Or
there.
not the whole road, but the crest of it, right there, will be 13 feet.
So it's going to be a gradual incline?
Yes,
not
you
a
have
road.
to gradual, we just need one line of defense. Or that datum of 13 feet, which is probably at the most 6 or 7 feet higher than the road itself at that 13 foot.
I don't know who's best to answer this question, but what does spring mode mean when the gates are put down? Spring mode.
Right, it's one of the modes in the gate, I believe, is that the one with or without the pumps? Because
Spring mode is with the pumps. Okay, so they automatically, when we put it in spring mode, the gate is going to travel all the way to the bottom, find bottom. It'll hit bottom, it'll raise 5 feet, and it'll stay there, and then it starts doing its measuring on creek side, ocean side.
5 feet, that's the number I was looking for.
Okay, so it'll raise up, it'll sit there, it'll make its decisions, it'll close when the tide starts to rise on the outside, so it wants to keep the low. Its objective is to keep the inside as low as possible. So when that runs, I put it in spring mode, the pumps will kick on automatically. If the elevation behind the gate reaches 3.0, the first pump will kick on. Okay, and then the second pump, and then the third pump. You know, I haven't had it, I only had it where one pump had to kick on. It never actually went to the second or third at this time.
And that spring mode description isn't really about spring.
Yeah, it's not about spring and mode, it's a name. It's basically, we put it in, just say operation with pumps. Or we put it in operation where the pumps are manually, you know, pushed in, you know, because sometimes you have where it's just a tidal elevation, so you're trapping the rarity out and nothing's going on behind, no rain or nothing like that. So you would put it into what, for whatever reason, they named it storm mode. Okay, and that's actually the gates operating, everything operating except for the pumps. Spring mode is fully operational, pumps operational as well.
And that one pump is at 80 gallons of water per second. There's 3 of them.
Dave, I just want to confirm something, that the pumps, am I correct in stating that the pumps are only to pump out rainwater? Yes,
Once this project is complete, yes.
thank you.
Interior drain.
Could be tidal, it could be some tidal too, right, Dave?
My name is Kathy Rogers. I've been in Port Monmouth since 1976. And of those people that weren't here at that time, it was back in 1980 when a group of the concerned citizens of Port Monmouth would hold meetings at the firehouse. And we got the federal government and the state and our township involved. The federal government did nothing to help us. The only reason that this project today, our township, is the one that helped us along to get this done. And I can vouch for them. Our leader at that time was our congressman. I won't pronounce his name, but I'm sure everybody that lives in Port Monmouth knows who he is. Would have nothing to do with this. We started this
is the town
and we had the money put in escrows, and it was there for them to start this project. If we didn't do that back then, you wouldn't have this project today, because you wouldn't have been able to afford it. The federal government came on board after we and the township did most of the work. My other concern is that the land down by the beach where the new homes were built on Wilson Avenue, Brainerd, and Monmouth, that was all meadows back then. It was all, and back then it was called flood. You didn't build there. Well, again, thanks to our federal government, they decided that, nah, we'll make it floodplain, so you'd be able to build there. The owner went, we defeated it here in town, again to our township committee. Well, he went to the higher court. Now, I understand the man had to own the property, and he had a right to do with it, so he decided he was going to build homes there, okay? He built them on the land that always flooded with water. Their houses went up. Anyone that bought those houses, if they did not ask the questions...
What is the question?
The question was, those houses, when they were built, you were built on stilts. If you got a flood, that wall was washed out. And you were told not to build anything in your garages. All your stuff was up in the attic. Nothing was on the ground. All of my stuff is downstairs. It has been for years, because that's the way it was built. But because of that, and they knew it flooded, they put everything upstairs so you would have your heating and stuff and you wouldn't have to worry about it. I know the people here tonight have concern.
I got
and
questions.
I understand, and I lost everything in Sandy. We still have local flooding. But until you allow this Army Corp of Engineers and the environmentalists and the state and federal government to finish this project, and another reason it's not finished is that we had people in the area, a lot of them from in the Belford area where we need the property, had dollar signs, and they wanted to get a lot of money for property that they had. Most of it has been settled, but there's 10 people that are still holdouts. And they think their property is worth a lot of money. I understand it's their property, but it's not a house, it's just meadows. And once they come forward and they give it to the township, then this project can get going. But we have to be patient, and I know it's hard. I've been flooded out 3 or 4 times. I've lost all my stuff 3 or 4 times. But I'm still here. We did fight for this back in the 80s, and that's why it's going. And the people that live down now on Brainerd and them have to, you get a little bit of water, or you know there's a storm coming, the first thing you do is get your car. Move it. You can't put it in your garage, and a lot of people build stuff in the garage, which they shouldn't have. And when you realize that your house was up high, you should have figured there was a reason for that. So, please, you gotta be patient with these people. I had hoped this project was done a lot of time before this, but we had a lot of holdouts and a lot of things that went wrong. And that's why they were here again tonight, to try to explain to the people what went wrong.
Good evening, everybody. My name is Brian Swatz. I live in 34 Brainerd, Fort Monmouth. Thank you, everybody, for their questions. Thank you, everybody, for being here tonight. I have a concern that exists in pertaining to December 23rd event and the flooding on Brainerd. I have a true belief and a true feeling, as a lot of other people probably do in this room, that the main reason why we flooded on December 23rd was because of the decision to start contract number 5 before contract 4A and 4B were started. As it was noted, the water came from right where contract 5 work started, maybe 2 or 3 weeks prior to that, where there was a natural berm on Main, and that water came from Main to Brainerd to Monmouth and to Wilson, as described by everybody. My question is, I understand why we're not starting contract 4A and 4B, and I understand that the rationalization to start 5. However, I truly believe that it leaves the 4 fingers of Port Monmouth vulnerable, and that is Main, Brainerd, Monmouth, and Wilson, for this duration of this project. And, you know, I understand we're not supposed to be living downstairs, and we're not living downstairs. On December 23rd, you know, I had no idea that obviously we were going to flood again, and I had no idea. We had Christmas presents on the ground. We conduct life. We pay property taxes for property that the bay comes and washes through. And as you all noticed, your property taxes went up, I'm sure, right? We're paying property taxes for property that I understand, you know, it's a difficult time, but we're not getting a discounted rate for living in the bay. You know, I've always described myself as a creature of the Raritan Bay. I love the area, you know, I'm proud to be a member of this community. I'm proud to be a part of this. I was born and raised in Union Beach. My family and I have been dealing with the Raritan Bay a long time. It's the same old story. I know, and it sucks. And I know there's no guarantee, but is there something we can do to prepare us for when this happens again? Because 5's not getting done for a while. We're very vulnerable until we're there.
Right. There will be an increase in elevation because they will be constructing a levee along that Main Street as well as the pump station. But again, the pump station, against that tidal inundation, it's not gonna be able to keep up with what the bay can supply.
That's why 4A and 4B
But
were supposed to happen first.
I think what maybe you're touching on, and maybe it is something we can have a discussion with, is during the construction of this portion, is there some sort of temporary measure, if we take it along Main Street, a berm of some sort or something that would keep the nuisance storm, or slightly worse than nuisance storm, from going over Main Street? Now, I'll tell you that we'll have a conversation with the DEP and the Army Corp about that. I don't know if it's feasible, but I get what you're trying to get at.
Yeah, I mean,
It's a good thought.
there's a reason why they decided to do 4A, 4B, and 4.5. And I understand why we can't do it because, you know, I understand the rest.
And that's why we put the pump station there, because that drainage swale in that area of Brainerd is the lowest part of the town. So.
Hi, my name is Teresa. I just recently moved from Brainerd.
Yay, I love it. Great neighbors like Brian. I just want to piggyback with a quick question. Great education, which I needed. The tax assessment. Is there anybody here from the mayor's office or anybody that can say, how do we, right, yes. Yes, that's totally. So where do we go to see what, if anything, can be done for the community that's impacted when, you know, everything seems to be going up and it's costing us more to deal with the situation that we're in?
Well, I can answer it this way, and I'm not the tax assessor. We can certainly, and if you'd like, we can certainly sit and talk to the tax assessor. But what drives tax assessments is sales of real estate. So what's happening is because there are a lot of houses, particularly in Port Monmouth, that are getting rebuilt, elevated, and frankly, they're worth a lot more than the houses that were there pre-Sandy, right? I mean, can anybody dispute that? So that's
The landing.
But, well, whatever someone's going to pay for the property, they're going to pay for the property. And those sales are what dictate assessed values. And that's just the way it works. By the way, that's the way the New Jersey Constitution requires you to assess properties. There's no ways. Now, if there was something very specific to a property that, you know, some feature of a property that maybe you could argue devalued it, the tax assessor does have the ability to take those into consideration property by property, but you couldn't just say, well, this area floods, so they're going to get 10% reduction in assessed value, because it doesn't matter. The sales are what generate the value.
I'm familiar, I was a real estate agent, I'm familiar with the real estate aspect of it, but it just seems that, you know, this is a major loss, and even to try and sell your house at this point, you know, there's something to be said about that. So,
Yeah, I mean,
there's
look,
no place to go.
I can certainly talk to the tax assessor about it, but I don't think that that's a solution, frankly.
I'm sure it isn't. I just thought I'd bring it up.
It's a good idea, but it's probably not legal.
Idea for us, not for you.
It doesn't bother me. Hey, you know what? It's just the truth about that, right? You know, if we were to lower the tax assessments in a neighborhood because of it potentially flooded, which by the way you can't really do. Let's say we did. Guess what? Everybody else is making up for that reduction. So somebody's paying for that. I'm not getting any less money. We're not getting any less money because other people are paying for it.
So can we get a bonus, you know, sort of on the side to help clean up?
Yeah, hi. I just wanted to double check the estimated completion time of the project. Is it 2025 or is it 5 years?
2025 currently spring.
Not 5 years.
Correct.
Okay, that's what
That
I
was
was. I have a question as to the raising the roadway. You said you're going to raise the roadway at Port Monmouth Road?
Just a portion of it.
Correct.
A portion of it from, after Main, I guess from the development,
in between the entrances of the two condos, Park Ferry and the Dunes.
And 36, you're going to raise the roadway in 36?
That's already been done. Contract 4A actually was completed. That included,
You raised it a
remember,
couple inches,
all the
I
power, utility poles were all upgraded.
Now, the other two roads you're talking about, I live on Campbell and Broadway. You're not going to do anything with the roadways, you're just going to put that thing across the road and that's it? You're not going to raise any portion of that roadway?
Correct.
Was it? If it doesn't have a big storm, you're not going to put the gates up. And those roads still get filled with water. And the roads are in horrible condition. And they're just going to get worse and worse over the years. Something's got to be done to raise these roadways. Valley gates, at least a couple of feet, just so people can walk there at different times, in high tide or low tide, whatever the hell it is, that has the big problems in the area. The roads are in shambles. Campbell Avenue, I've been living there since 2005, and all they do is come in and patch. Patch here, patch there, patch there. Everywhere in the township in Middletown has had new roadways put in twice since I lived on Campbell Avenue. And it's getting to be that portion of Campbell Avenue by the creek, they put in a new bridge and they repaved the other side, developed. Nothing was done coming into Port Monmouth.
or a portion of Campbell will get new pavement from this project only because we're going to put a culvert across it.
Look,
But
I
that's
totally agree.
only if-
Campbell Avenue needs to be repaved, but there's no sense repaving it now, because now they're gonna, do a lot of damage to it with this project. So it will get repaved, it'll be one of our priority streets to repave. The one thing I'll just say about elevating it, though, is you gotta be careful about that, because now you put, all the properties, now the homes are now below the road.
There are no homes where it gets flooded. There's no homes there at all. It just goes down
You're
from
talking
the end
about-
of the street, Creek Road, and
Oh, you're
Campbell
talking about the
Avenue.
section
It drops
right by
down 4 feet. That's where the flooding
So you're
comes.
just talking about that section right by the bridge? Okay, all right.
That's the only section I'm talking about.
Okay.
The rest of the street is terrible condition, but it doesn't get flooded.
All right.
Hi, you were speaking about the levels. Is there going to be a provision in this project for perhaps like a web page where people can actually monitor some of the readings that you take, the elevations? I mean, I'm assuming it's a computerized system, or all that goes into some data handling system?
That's an interesting idea.
Okay.
Please
consider it.
Yeah, no, thank you. I like it. I like it.
Hi, thank you for providing the good information tonight. I'm new to the area, so I appreciate hearing what's going on. With Main Street, just to reiterate, there's going to be a wall, part of it, like before the pump station,
Yes.
and then it's going to be a berm all the way down to the beach.
Correct. That bend up until that point, about, I'll say 400 feet before the pump station, the levee will start right here, going all the way to Port Monmouth Road, and from that point, the Broadway will be flooded.
Okay, and just the next thing, so I live off of, I'm on Park Ferry, so I'm behind the creek that floods all the time. So can I just ask, like, what are you doing back there? Like, did you say you're putting drains in, or?
Right. In the back, there'll be drainage swales to convey the water to the pump station along the back, and that will be earthen levee berm in back of Park Fair.
So is that part of the
On one
project?
side, on the Port Monmouth Road side, the road will increase in elevation.
So that's part of the project you're working on now?
Correct.
Okay.
Or that, yes. The levy portion is part of the base contract, which is what he's working on.
Thank you.
Thank you all very much for this whole project that you've put so much time into and all the money that the federal government is giving us. But the consideration here is basically, I believe, what the people of Port Monmouth want to know is, when is the flooding going to stop? Between the flooding, Sandy, losing your home, which was dramatic, closing the school, which was horrendous. Where are these children can't even get to school because they can't get to the bus. The flooding was so bad. So that's a great concern to see how these side streets, in addition to the main Campbell and the main Main and the main Wilson, these side streets are so bad you can't get out of your house. So these children can't go to school. And to me, that's one of the most important things. Our taxes did go up, our school is now closed. This is a great community that's family oriented. So I really hope you can take into consideration some of these side blocks that are getting tremendously flooded. People are losing their cars. So that's all I have to say. Thank you for the consideration.
And yes, that's the whole purpose of this project, is to reduce the risk of flooding to the community. And however, until it gets completely constructed, which we're still waiting on some easement, hoping the contract 4B gets awarded this summer, and within 2 years, it should be complete.
My name is Bruce Stafford. I live at 39 Brainerd Avenue in Fort Monmouth. Dave, for starters, you made mention at the beginning of this that it's going to be completed at the spring of 2025. The only reason I want to get that clarified is for each and every one of us that get the Middletown Matters, it states in there it's not going to be completed until the end of 2025. Okay. What's the window?
That's a nice
A lot of it is dynamic. If you asked me 4 years ago, it would have been complete because it is possible to complete it sooner, but adding some flexibility because it's really driven by obtaining the real estate easements, which it's impossible for me to project how much pushback, how many times back and forth the negotiations and court cases will take.
But based on what you're saying,
2025,
you're looking at the spring of 2025, not the end of it. Correct.
I'd be happy if we're wrong and he's right.
I would be very happy as well.
no matter what, we're going to do it as fast as we can.
Okay. On another subject, somebody mentioned something about dredging. That doesn't help. If you own a boat and you go out across the Raritan Bay and you hit 2 feet of water and bottom out, once you get out of that, you could be in an area that it's 200 feet deep. But guess what? The level of the water across the top is the same. There's no difference. So dredging is not going to help. Dan, the other day you drove down Main Street. Dan?
Yes, sir.
You drove down Main Street the other day through about a foot of water.
Correct.
When you first entered the water, you're aware of that pipe that goes under the road there?
Yes.
So everyone knows, a lot of that water that no one realizes goes under the street before it crosses the road on Main Street. When that tide's coming in, it could be a good hour and a half that we're getting hit with water before you see it on top of the street. And if you're in doubt about that, come and look at my backyard. I'm at 39 Brainerd. I've got a lot of water back there yet, and it's up the side of my house. The telephone poles that Dave was talking about on Main Street, that part of the construction is completed. They actually installed brand new poles and new service. My question in reference to that, Dave, is they're doing a lot of work out on Highway 36 with new poles and new lines. Does that have anything to do with supporting electric for the pump stations?
No.
No.
We already did our upgrade
Okay.
from the firehouse to the pump station.
And they did a beautiful job. It looks great out there. The commuter parking lot across the street from Wilson Deli, that needs to be raised yet, correct? There's a speed bump as you first drive in off of 36?
No, that portion, our flood wall will just tie into that. That bump is already at elevation 13 as well as Route 36. We have that line. All that work was part of 4A.
Okay, because they raised Highway 36 approximately 6 inches. But then I was told a couple of years ago that that speed bump as you enter that parking lot was what level that parking lot needed to be raised to. Is that correct or not correct? There's a speed bump as you first pull in.
Right. I'm not sure exactly that location.
It's the entrance into the commuter parking lot from off of 36.
I'm familiar with where it is, but I'm not sure about the elevation.
Okay.
But we will assure that everything is, because that's one of the staging areas for the 4B contract. So whoever contractor gets that needs to do the surveys to ensure that we're at an elevation of 13
Okay.
feet.
The slide gate that's out there on Old Port Monmouth Road, when that was initially completed, there was damage done to that, I believe. There was wires cut out there, and they had to go back and rewire everything back up. Is there a maintenance contract on that slide gate? I know you had said that
The
periodic.
non-federal sponsor, the DEP, then also
Yeah,
operates. and
anything that happens to that
maintains
gate, you know, when we're doing our inspections, we're responsible to get it repaired or fixed, or eventually go to the Army Corp and say they'll pay for it, but, yeah, we actually have, had issues where we had to get things
There
repaired.
was damage done to that slide gate, correct?
That was actually before we took it over, and then the Army Corp took care of it.
Now, is there a maintenance contract on the operation of that to make sure it's functioning properly?
We actually do the maintenance ourselves on it. So, and if we come across any issues at that point, it'll get, you know, put out for contracts to get repaired.
Just a suggestion, if that damage ever happens again, you might want to consider putting a camera out there. Because that was pretty serious, because that made it not operational.
It makes it,
Mark,
well, with the
we
gate-
actually have contingency methods,
Yeah, with the
like
gate,
the
if we
car method. It does not need the remote control or anything.
Yeah, we typically, we do all our testing with the electrics, closing it with the power. And then we also, when we do our testing, we do block and tackle and just back it up. It only took, I think, the county's little gator. We hooked it to the back of that and it pulled it closed. So basically, even the last time that we closed it, because it's so much easier just to hook up block and tackle and just back up and shut it than to sit there, you know, just waiting, you know, I think it's 14 minutes, you know, from start to finish. So we just use it manual, and all our testing is done with the electric to make sure everything's okay.
Yeah.
So,
And I want to thank Dan, too, because I spoke to him the other day. They've been doing a great job with those slide gates at the Fuse Creek near the marina. Every time I go up there to check those gates, when we're supposed to get a serious storm or northeast wind with new moon or full moon, they've been closing those slide gates at mean low tide. And when I say mean low tide, that means when the tide is as far out as it can go, the slide gates get closed, and that means all the meadows out there is empty right now, which means any of that water that we're getting from Compton Creek, if things are working properly, should drain out there, okay? So under normal conditions, if the water goes over the curb in front of your house and it hits the storm drains, it should be able to drain out, providing everything is working properly into the Fuse Creek area. I should say Compton Creek, headed towards the marina. Earlier, Dave, you had mentioned that, and I know the last meeting was at, there was a replenishment of sand every 10 years. Now, you completed the project in 2015. Are we talking 10 years from start of project or 10 years at completion of project? Because to the left side of the drawing, a lot of the sand has eroded away.
Or it's actually 10 years from the start of the project, which would be 2024 we were looking at doing. But this summer, you should be getting material not as a replenishment, but as a beneficial use of a neighboring Army Corps operations dredging job, which will place the material that we need on the site at no cost.
Well, the last time they supported that beach, it was with 12 feet of sand, okay? Are they gonna do the same operation where they're gonna have a barge out there about a mile off the coast?
No, because this is a neighboring dredging from the Compton Creek Shoal Harbor dredging they're going to be doing.
So they're gonna truck it?
They're just going to pump it over and bulldoze it.
Okay.
And normally, renourishments for this project would potentially be trucked in because it's a smaller quantity, so for cost benefit, it would be trucked in versus barge 5 months out.
Yeah, so last time there was a barge about a mile off the coast, and they pumped it in.
More
by
than a
rail.
mile, yeah.
You got the sand from the ocean last time, are you gonna get it from the ocean or the bay this time?
No, they're gonna get it from the bay this time. Last time they got it from Sandy Hook. At the beginning, Dave, you made mention that the project was $250 million. When this project first started, based on what Kathy Rogers said, it was $30 million. It went from 30 to 130 at the last meeting. Now we're at 250. Does that include the work that's already been done at the slide gates?
Or when we, just to be clear, when we executed the PPA in 2014 January, I believe it was 105 or 110 at that point.
Okay, now it's 250.
Right.
Okay, does that include the project that's completed at the?
Yes, it does.
Okay.
It's not remaining, it's all costs escalate.
Okay. And just to add to what Brian had said, he lives on Raynard as well. I think it would be beneficial to all of us if they look at the berm situation to the right side of Main Street, because we're very happy to see the Army Corp of Engineers out there doing the work they need to work, but they don't realize it, but they've taken the berm down to the point where it's level with the road right now. And when we got hit with that high tide on December 23rd, there was timbers that they had buried in the marsh that left the marshland and wound up 2 streets away on someone's property on Monmouth Street. They were huge timbers, huge. And they didn't mean any harm by it, but they have to get equipment out there, they have deliveries coming, they have heavy equipment out there, and the berm has dissipated away. So even if the berm was 12 to 16 inches high, that's 12 to 16 inches more water that we're going to get without that berm being in place.
Or not necessarily, because water does reach its equilibrium, like you said before, water goes under the street through the stormwater system. So as long as there's an entry point there open, water would equal out. So wherever the elevation is, even with the berm, it would equal on the inside.
Oh, it equaled out all right. Dan can vouch for what I'm saying. There's a pipe that runs under the road there, and it's
Right.
open on both ends.
Exactly.
So when the tide comes in, it blows under the road, unbeknownst to anyone, and once the tide gets high enough, it then crosses the road.
The pressure.
Okay.
So that's why, and it's not my authority, I'm not allowed, I can spend money on this project, but I understand, and it is frustrating because there are some quick fixes, so to say, that could be done, but I'm not authorized to spend.
The suggestion might be one of those walls that they blow up and put that on the inlet side and blow it up to prevent water from going through the pipe. All right, once again, I want to thank you guys very much. Thank you.
Well, you had mentioned that the project was fully funded at the beginning of construction, and now it's about $100 million more. Is the balance of the project funded?
Yes, this project is still currently funded.
Hi, excuse me. So I have a question. You can explain to me the road grazing. Just, I'm trying to visualize with the water, like how that affects right now. Like, I know it's going to raise, but then how does that affect how things settle? And sort of connected to that is, will there be like a speed bump? And how is that going to affect like just the speed of people driving on that road?
Or it will be gradual, so there'll be a gradual increase to, so this area where there's going to be levee will tie into the road. There's going to be sheeting under the road, and the road will be at 13 feet there. And then there will be essentially a flood wall structure on the north, but it's really just the retaining wall that will act as the flood wall at the 13-foot elevation. And then it will tie into this portion of levee that ties into the dune. So areas here will be a gradual grade up to this high point, and then areas east will gradually go down to settle or get to the existing grade before the entrance of
Go for it.
So it won't be as sudden as a speed bump, but the road will increase grade up and grade down.
So you're saying it's going to increase up and then it's going to gradually go down?
Yes.
So then, I'm just thinking, since the cars are going up, I live right around there,
Right,
so like,
but it's over the
speed
course
down
of,
that
I
road.
believe, 400, or is there a length? 600 feet. Yeah, it's 600 feet. So over the course of the 600 feet, it would rise, I believe that maximum amount is about 7 feet in elevation. So for every 100 feet, the road will increase a little over a foot.
Just trying to, is there going to affect people going faster or slower? It depends on what side of the road you live. I'm being selfish, I'm just curious.
Oh,
This, you know, how fast the cars are going to be driving. Also, you had a question,
Well,
right?
when you say 13 feet, where is it now?
Right. So it's probably, yeah, actually, at the parks, it's at 9, but some areas here, I think the existing elevation is closer to 7 feet elevation.
So going up 6.
So, yeah, it's the maximum point, I believe, that increases 6, 7 feet.
Thank you. How you doing? I'm Dave. I live on Willow Street on the head.
Okay.
So the way I understand it, you got to cross the Henry Hudson Trail with a man gate. I guess, Dan, that'll be under your, who closes that gate on the Henry Hudson
Or,
Trail?
see, now, that gate is the same as the Campbell Ave gate. The Henry Hudson Trail will kind of do a horseshoe curve to Campbell Ave. So you'll be able to get on the trail at Campbell Ave.
So you're gonna reroute the trail?
Correct.
Okay. The second part of that question is, if you're familiar with Willow Street, it's very long. The whole street drains to a sewer in front of my house, which also has a drainage creek that runs parallel to the Henry Hudson Trail.
Yes, this one right.
Okay, so during high rain events, similar to what everyone at Brainerd and a certain tide, sewers obviously don't drain. So how do you get that water to the other side of the wall?
Right, so there's going to be gates there to prevent the tidal water from coming in. And for the storm water, as mentioned before, there's going to be swales and culverts. There's a culvert that crosses Campbell to allow that water to the north.
So you're gonna pull that water from behind Willow using a swale.
Yes,
towards the other
all
pump.
along to the pump station over that's currently under construction.
And that's similar to the swale that you're building over behind Brainerd to pull that water out of that neighborhood, from what I understand.
Correct. In some areas, this is actually an underground culvert and an open swale. Swales are generally more open, they're not sealed tight. But where it crosses the roadways, it will be a culvert. But yeah,
So there is really, back to the Henry Hudson Trail, there's really no point there where water can get through, because you're gonna reroute the trail somehow.
correct. And the biggest thing is there's a gate. There will be an outfall because normally it will drain just the way it currently drains. The gate will be open and the water will continue to dump into Compton. However, during those tidal events, the gate will need to be shut and any storm water, rainwater runoff will be diverted to the pump.
Okay, from that second pump station, all the way back to 36,
there is levy. This section here is a little over 1,000 total levy, as well as this area here is also.
So the levee looks like it's on the other side of the trail all the way back to wrapping up 36.
Or
That's a wall.
this is levee here, and this is wall.
Okay.
And some of this wall probably will look more like a curb, because as you get to higher elevations, your wall's only going to be 1 or 2 feet out of the grade.
Okay, so no change to the drainage behind those homes, is basically was my question.
Correct.
I'm thankful that we're getting this project done. I've been here 20 years, lost my house during the same thing. Everybody has it probably here, but I know it takes time. I'm fingers crossed for 2025 that we're all protected. You know, it's been a long time coming. Thank you.
Hi, thanks for everything you've done and explained so far. Newer resident at the Dunes, and I understand the road raising may also include seawall on either one or both sides of that raised road, am I correct?
Right, it'll be a flood wall slash retaining wall at the north side of the road. Basically, they'll hold the road up as well as it'll act as.
So at that point, are we at the high of the 5 or 6 feet, or at some lower grade reaching Eggert Way, which is the entrance to Dunes?
Wait, I'm trying.
That wall, since it'll be the same
Yeah,
as the road.
the high point of the wall, or the wall will be consistently 13.
I'm leading up to my actual question, and that is, what will you, right now, there's a sidewalk on the north side of Port Monmouth. Will that sidewalk remain at that elevation?
No, that will also be elevated as well, so the edge of the wall will act as a curb to the sidewalk, as well as there'll be a fence, because there will be a drop to the dunes property.
And what will be done to make sure that any water that now, between the new raised road, wall, raised sidewalk, and the existing landscape, before you enter the dunes, that water doesn't collect there, storm, rainwater, things like that?
We have added in this corner an additional storm drain, and it'll all be sloped to that corner, and then that will continue the cross, that stormwater system crosses Port Monmouth Road into that Park Ferry area, and then that gets channeled back to the pumps on Main Street.
Thanks, that was very good. Thank you.
Hey, how are you? So, I understand that people don't want to sell their properties, that have to be involved in the project, and this has been going on since the 80s, what's going to change it now?
Or because we're not able, it's fairly recent, because we're not able to give the non-federal sponsor notice to, and it's not really sell as in the entire property, it's more compensation. We're not kicking anybody out of their homes. It's compensation for use and to be able to build the because we
actually need to be cleaned out.
equipment on their
And get that all
property.
messed up and
Just, let me explain how the real estate market works, because that is, it's kind of a complicated component. But first, let me tell you, the people who hold out, it doesn't really slow down construction, because we go to the court, we post money with the court, and the project proceeds. The complicated part of it is that before you can even do that, we have to get surveyors. We have to go to every single property and survey the route of the wall or the levee, whichever it was going to be. They have to survey that. There's environmental rules that you have to look at. There's soil issues that you have to look at, and then you have to meet with the property owner. and make sure it's not going to really negatively impact somebody. Fortunately, a lot of these properties are just vacant wetlands. But there are a handful that go in people's backyards or go behind the businesses on Highway 36, for example, businesses between 36 and Willow Street, right? So we wanted to make sure we weren't going to do anything to impact their operation of their businesses. So there's a lot of legwork that goes into it, but now all of that is done. We literally are just in the process now filing with the court to proceed with all these. So they're really, those issues are not going to really hold us up at this point.
Thank you.
Hi, Mayor. Hi, thank you. I'm just wondering, I know I missed part of the presentation, but are there going to be additional storm drains? I heard you say in that area by Park Ferry, by the dunes. Are there going to be additional storm drains throughout the town?
Or mainly
The
that
project?
Brainerd, there will be a lot of catch basins to get the water through that low point in town, through the culvert, through the swale to the pump station. For the most part, this existing storm drains will be able, for paths of the water, such as the one behind Willow, will feed into our drainage swales along the border of the project that can flow to the pump station. So additional actual catch basin or storm drains aren't needed. We're using existing infrastructure.
Okay. I live at the end of Seabreeze, and it's right adjacent to Fort Monmouth Line, right there. And the end of Seabreeze it's constantly flooded over our curb. You know, the street is actually wearing away, it's gone. And there's a creek that runs there. And there is one of those drains, that goes under the road, right into the meadow there. But that's always getting clogged up. I mean, does anybody, is there like a constant, like, let's keep these clear and make sure that they're running? Yeah.
That's a separate drainage system with Middletown, but you can call it Public Works and we work with the county to clear out some of the ditches.
Thank you.
Do you have any questions? Yes. Okay.
I just have one more question.
9 o'clock, so the normal.
You didn't ask one before.
I know a lot of people left, but I just wanted some people that were here tonight talked about how high our taxes are. Well, I'll tell you what, like I said, I've been in Middletown for a long time. Now, the houses that are down where they have a lot of the flooding, they went for $500,000, $600,000. So of course the taxes are going to be higher. My house is not even worth that. I couldn't get that if I tried to hand it to you. But I have to pay the higher tax because of that. So you've got to realize that your taxes is based on the house you buy. So you have to look at that when you buy the house. And again, because of those houses down there, and I know people like to live by the water, and I appreciate that. But back when we first lived there, we never got any water, didn't come up any further than Brainerd Avenue, not all the way up. And as they started to add the houses, the water kept moving up and up until finally, at Sandy, which was astronomical, we went right up to Highway 36. That never happened before. But again, the township did not raise your taxes. Your taxes is based on the house you live in and what you paid for it. And like I said, I lost everything in Sandy. I just went back to what I originally had. A lot of people went extraordinary, and so their house is worth more money, and that's what your house is based on. So it was not the township, and then you got to look at your school taxes, you got to look at your county taxes, you got to look at your garbage taxes. You take everything out individually, your actually taxes here in Middletown didn't raise that much.
One more. And this only pertains to a handful of people that are here, if they're even here.
I'm gonna be the unfortunate one that lives directly across the street from the floodgate on Brooklyn. Okay? There's gonna be a lot of disturbing the ground, a lot of hammering. I happen to have a 98-year-old house with a construction. So I have mega concern over the constant vibration.
Right, actually, I'm sorry I didn't go over that. Our contracts, every contract, but the contract 5-2, we have vibration monitors as well as the contractor, if you're within 300
Oh, I'm right
feet.
there. I'm right there.
Right, if you're within 300 feet of an awarded section, you will get a notice from our contractor's subcontractor to do a pre-home inspection, which is, yes. So you'll get notice to do this inspection, so they can inspect your home, check, as well as we set up real-time vibration monitors because there will be pile driving. We understand that we don't want to cause any damage.
So you see a crazy lady running across the street, screaming at them, it means I saw something cracked.
Right. Well, and they'll also get a text message 75% before, or actually 25% before damage is caused, to stop and reevaluate their methodology of construction, because we have an exceedance level that they can't cause more than 1 inch per second vibration.
So I have a further question, and my 8 neighbors aren't here, I have no clue. This pounding is only going to really involve maybe like 2 blocks of houses, if that, okay? The rest of them are getting the dirt letting. And other ones are too far away. Now, like, I have, the other ones around here, new houses right there on Main Street, wood pilings. Another gentleman next to me has just masonry piers, columns, and then they have, the other ones, 3 houses have the foundation,
Superior walls,
thank you.
yeah.
Superior walls. So a certain vibration might affect me, but not him. How do you, who's going
Or
to determine that?
it's still based on the level of vibration, so it shouldn't, but that's why do these pre-inspections, they'll go around, check mark if you have existing cracks as well, and if there is a problem, that a new crack.
I mean, my house was totally redone, and they raised me up, but they also did new foundation on top of what I have as an existing footing and foundation. The engineers at that time felt, listen, if the footing stood up during Hurricane Sandy, you're really compacted, it's a good base, and they went up. But, you know, I have a lot of concern on the vibration.
Right, and we put the vibration monitors between our work and the homes, so they are closer to the actual work,
Because if you're doing
and the
4
contractor
back
stops.
from the street, and what is the street, 20 feet, 30 feet? So 40, 70, and then my feet's another, the house is another 20 feet away. You're like less than 100 feet away from my house you're doing that.
Oh, exactly, you know, on Old Port Monmouth Road, the Coyle's house, we put monitors in between there.
That's that one house where you see the wall around it.
Yes.
That's the one house.
You're driving piles within 10 feet of their house.
Or the bases.
They're also doing newer construction, so that again, that's.
Not really. No, that's not good. You know, that's been there for a long time. Yeah.
But yeah,
Rare-
just.
It's rare for the vibration. You're gonna feel the vibration. So your perception is much more
I felt when
sensitive.
they were doing the dunes.
You'll feel it with
down
trucks,
the
even when we're doing the levee. The trucks carrying the dirt, you're gonna
I feel it now, when they go past Main Street, if I'm sitting on the couch.
but there's an established level that,
Threshold.
it's a threshold that damage doesn't occur
Does the
below
water
that.
go on my house, or is it?
No, you'll see
on
it,
the ground.
Ground.
it'll look like a box, and it's got a rod driven into the ground that senses the vibration.
But I'll definitely be in contact with somebody to come in and check my house.
Yes, what was your address, so I can,
92 Main Street.
92 Main Street? So I don't know if they're part of the option.
They are part of the option area.
You won't get a
guessing
notification with what we're doing right now.
Right, because you're further down the street.
We're not, yeah.
Right.
When the option is awarded, then, when they start to do that work, so I want to emphasize to everybody that you get that notice, take advantage of that inspection.
Oh, yeah.
It's photo inspection, it's detailed inspection, and it'll just eliminate or minimize any disputes down
And
the road.
in the event there is a problem, who pays for the repair?
The contractor, yeah, they're insured for that type of stuff, so they would negotiate it out with you or resolve the claim. The challenge is whether or not it exceeds the threshold. So, I say challenge, but contractually, that's where the liability lies.
I really don't have a question. I just want to thank you guys for doing this, and for the people who are listening to me. I've lived here for 60 years. I've investigated this thing since day one. I know Dave, I know just about everybody here, and it's going to work. Let me tell you, people, it's going to work.
Yes, it is.
One more question.
Dave, picture it down.
One more question.
The levee or the flood? Your picture from Irene?
Yeah.
I'm not sure if this is for the Army Corps, and I probably disagree a little bit with this gentleman. I mean, this strategy looks as though it may work for a certain period of time, given the patterns with our climate. Has there been any consideration of perhaps discouraging development in these sensitive and these vulnerable areas for like some sort of managed retreat? Has that option been considered?
Yeah, we do look at that, and I can tell you, after Sandy, there was a lot of discussion about that. But let me tell you the reality of what happens, and Kathy will know this better than most people, but the average person who lived in Port Monmouth, their average house was probably worth $100,000, right? If the federal government came and said, we're going to buy you out, we'll pay you your $100,000 for your property, that person would be almost impossible for them to rebuy somewhere else in Middletown. Now you're talking about sending them to a different school district, taking their kids out of the school district. It became a very emotional issue. And people look at that and say, you're forcing me out of my home. That's the way they look at it. So that was not an option that was viable for Port Monmouth. And it's not an option viable in most places. We're a little bit unusual here. You know, in most parts of the country, people who live closest to the water are well-to-do and high property values. Just the opposite here, right? You know, Port Monmouth, North Middletown, probably the lowest property values in town. Now it's changing as the houses get elevated, but at the time, buying people out didn't make social sense for people because they would have been forced out of town, basically.
I just think of a long-term plan that, I mean, not to force anybody out, force anybody to sell, but long-term to maybe not continue having these houses in areas
Well,
where
first of all, Port Monmouth, Belford, there's not a heck of a lot left to build on. And so and I will tell you that right on Park Avenue, right down the street from Park Ferry, right, where those new houses are, right? that have gravel yards, by the way. Those were smaller bungalows. Most of them were damaged in Sandy. We went to, the state has a program called Blue Acres, where they will buy properties. We went to them and said, look, why don't we, these people have moved out of their houses, they're not coming back. Let us buy these properties using this Blue Acres money. It wasn't enough. They want to buy, they will buy a block of 10 houses, a block of 20 houses. This was like 3 or 4 houses. They weren't interested, they wouldn't fund it. So we tried. So now there's new houses on all those properties. Yeah, Charlie.
Tony, when the county bought, I don't need that tape. When the county bought the property from Hughes Creek, the Belford years ago, they bought that to get rid of all those bungalows over along the beach to do away with that flood. And that's what happened to those people.
Yeah.
You know, they bought it cheap, they got maybe 100, 150,000, then they had to go buy houses that were 250,000. So that doesn't always work.
It doesn't. It sounds like a good idea until you really get into the weeds of trying to actually make it happen. And when you realize how it impacts people, it's pretty harsh in most cases. Yep.
Tony, one other quick question. Has that easement situation been settled between Rich Carr's house and Ron's house for that swale to be installed between Brainerd and Main Street?
I believe it was today.
Oh, it was today?
The check was issued today.
Oh, that's great. That's good news.
Yeah.
This corner down here, that's going to be a dirt berm and road you're raising up to 13 feet. This is going to be a dirt berm?
Yes.
Up to this?
Up to that
That
point.
is, how come it changes the concrete and not concrete?
Or it's usually based on cost and the geotechnics below, whether the material below what we're building on, if it's suitable to build on, or whether the quantity of material, because flood walls generally are more expensive to construct.
Yeah, we should have did a whole dirt work.
However, the footprint of it sometimes is limited, as well as the foundation, because you have a large foundation for a levee. So if you have to remove hundreds of thousands of cubic yards of material, that becomes very costly versus dig a 10-foot hole and drive piles 85 feet into the ground, maybe more cost beneficial. Plus, from an environmental standpoint, you have a smaller impact or footprint.
The pump station that's there, that's going to be 40 feet from the roadway?
At least, yeah.
The berm is going to be part of that pump station?
Yes,
So
the pump station will be on top of the berm, a couple feet high.
Well, the control, the pumps and
One other thing I should add, and we didn't really touch on this. You see these purple areas here, and over here? So what Dave's talking about is when you build the levees, right, the base is pretty wide. Almost every bit of that throughout here is wetlands, right? So you're not allowed to disturb wetlands. You're not supposed to disturb wetlands. The DEP have rules that say if you disturb it X amount of square feet of wetland, you have to make up for it somewhere else. And this is a good rule, really. And so if anybody who's familiar, and I live right near here, and everyone knows this area, just on the other side of the levee, on the East Keithsburg side, those wetlands are in horrible condition, right? They're filled with these phragmites, which are an invasive plant that actually destroy wetlands. Part of this project is going to be to restore all these areas, get rid of the phragmites, replace it with natural wetlands vegetation that is much better for the local ecology. So with all the construction that's happening, there's other things happening too to improve the environment and improve the ability of these wetlands areas to store stormwater. So that's really, other than the ecology, one of the purposes of wetlands is to store stormwater, so it doesn't wind up in our basements and in our houses. So the healthier those wetlands are, the more water they'll be able to.
Did they mitigate them already?
It hasn't been done yet.
Oh, it has not been done.
We purchased wetland mitigation bank credits So, there's been mitigation in other areas of the state, but these
These
two
two.
areas
Yeah, they
have not
Okay.
yet been mitigated. We're finalized.
When you do some of the work on Creek Road, I don't know what part of Creek Road, maybe I'm in the wrong area, but in the middle of Creek Road is this big long ditch. And they used to come and they used to pump it out. They used to clean it out. Now, people would, we have new construction going on, 2 or 3 houses on, and they're dumping their stuff in there. And it's now backed up, and so now instead of the water, it's taken from the storm drain that's right there, that used to go into there, there's nowhere for it to go. So why aren't they cleaning these out anymore?
Well, now that you've just reported this. No, we will talk to the county, though. The county, you know, what used to be called the Mosquito Commission, they would go in and clean out these streams periodically. And if we request a location where there's excess material being dumped in there and start to block up the flow of water, they'll usually do it. So Ted or I will talk to them and get that on their schedule. Yeah.
That'll help the people on Creek Road.
Just to end on a positive note for tonight, Joe is my team leader. I'm the resident engineer for the construction that's ongoing right now. Both of us worked on the flood control program in Boundbrook. Took us probably 10 years to complete it. It was a bigger, and Tom worked on it.
I'm going to tag along with that, Thompson Lewinsky. I'm assigned with DEP to the Corps projects, Peckman River and also Passaic Tidal out of Newark. But Boundbrook, where there was a lot of loss of cars and property, and we lost 3 people. 3 people died. 16 years to complete about 2 miles of levee, mile and a half of levee, and about almost, I'd say 3/4 mile of flood walls in various spots. 2 pump stations, 2 road closure gates, and a railroad closure gate. So 16 years, please be patient, we're almost there.
But the point is, it's working in Boundbrook. The flood maps have been revised there. That's another lengthy process. But yeah, one of the pictures Dave showed tonight was of one of the flood walls there during Hurricane Irene. It was almost like it's a test of our system. One side of the wall, the water was maybe 12 inches from the top of our wall. The other side it was bone dry. And it was a chemical plant on the other side. So stay with us, keep pushing us. You know, we're here to build this thing and get it done to reduce your potential for flooding. So, but thank you all for coming out tonight.
Thank you.
Thank you.